The hospital corridor buzzed with its usual chaos. Nurses rushed between rooms, doctors discussed cases in hushed voices, and families waited anxiously on uncomfortable plastic chairs. Among all this activity, nobody paid much attention to the small figure sitting alone in the corner of the pediatric ward waiting area. 8-year-old Tommy Martinez had been coming to St. Mary's Children's Hospital for 3 months now. His mother, Maria, worked 2 jobs to pay for his treatments, often leaving him alone during the long afternoon sessions. The chemotherapy made him tired and weak, but what hurt most was the loneliness that seemed to follow him everywhere. Tommy's thick black hair had started falling out in patches, leaving him with an uneven, patchy look that made other kids stare. He wore a baseball cap his father had given him before leaving the family 2 years ago. The cap was too big now, sliding down over his thin face, but he refused to take it off. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the waiting room was fuller than usual. A local news crew had arrived to film a story about the hospital's new children's wing. The reporter, a well-dressed woman with perfect hair, was interviewing Dr. Peterson about the facility's latest equipment and programs. Tommy watched from his corner seat, trying to make himself invisible. He had learned that when cameras were around, adults acted differently. They smiled bigger, spoke louder, and pretended everything was wonderful. But Tommy knew the truth about hospitals. They were scary places where children came when something was very wrong. The camera crew moved through the ward, filming B-roll footage of the colorful walls and modern equipment. Tommy noticed how the other children and their families suddenly sat up straighter when the camera pointed their way. Everyone wanted to look happy and hopeful for the news story. Dr. Sarah Chen had been working at St. Mary's for 5 years. She specialized in pediatric oncology, which meant she spent her days treating children with cancer. It was demanding work that required not just medical knowledge, but emotional strength. Every day, she witnessed both heartbreaking losses and miraculous recoveries. Dr. Chen had noticed Tommy during his visits. Unlike many of the other children, he never had a crowd of visitors. His mother came when she could between her jobs at EA, the restaurant, and the cleaning service. But often Tommy sat alone. The boy tried to act tough, but Dr. Chen could see the fear and sadness in his dark eyes. During the filming, Dr. Chen was asked to walk through the ward and interact naturally, with patience. The cameras followed her as she checked on various children, all of whom seemed excited to be on television. She played along, knowing that positive media coverage helped the hospital secure funding for programs that truly helped kids like Tommy. As she made her rounds with the camera crew trailing behind, Dr. Chen approached the section where Tommy usually sat. She could see him in his corner, cap pulled low, trying to disappear. The boy's thin shoulders were hunched, and he was staring at an old magazine without really reading it. The reporter was asking Dr. Chen questions about patient care and treatment success rates. She answered professionally, discussing statistics and medical advances. But her attention kept drifting to Tommy, who looked smaller and more alone than ever, with all the cameras and commotion around him. Tommy had been having a particularly difficult week. The latest round of chemotherapy had made him sick for days, and he had missed school again. His classmates had stopped calling to check on him months ago. When you're 8 years old and dealing with cancer, it's hard to relate to friends who worry about homework and playground games. His mother had dropped him off that morning with promises to return as soon as her shift ended at the restaurant. She always looked tired these days, with dark circles under her eyes and worry lines on her forehead. Tommy knew she was scared too, even though she tried to hide it with bright smiles and cheerful words. The news crew was wrapping up their interviews in the main area and preparing to film some final shots. The reporter wanted to capture the human side of the hospital, the hope and healing that happened every day. She directed the cameraman to get some footage of children playing in the recreational area. Dr. Chen finished explaining a new treatment protocol to the reporter and camera crew. As they prepared to move to another section of the hospital, she excused herself for a moment. Something about Tommy's posture, the way he seemed to shrink into himself, pulled at her heart. The waiting area had grown quieter as some families were called back for appointments. Tommy remained in his corner, still pretending to read the same magazine page he had been staring at for the past 20 minutes. His small hands gripped the edges of the magazine tightly, and Dr. Chen could see his knuckles were white with tension. She had treated hundreds of children during her career, each one leaving an impression on her heart. But there was something about Tommy that reminded her why she had chosen this difficult specialty. Behind all the medical procedures and treatment plans were real children dealing with fears and challenges that no child should face alone. The camera crew was getting impatient, ready to move on to their next location. The reporter was checking her notes and preparing for the final segment of their story. In a few minutes, they would pack up their equipment and leave, taking with them carefully crafted footage that would tell viewers about the hospital's excellent facilities and dedicated staff. Dr. Chen looked back at Tommy one more time. The boy had finally looked up from his magazine and was watching the camera crew pack their equipment. For just a moment, their eyes met across the busy waiting room. In that brief connection, she saw something that the cameras would never capture: the quiet courage of a child facing something far too big for his small shoulders to carry. The reporter called her name, ready to film the final interview segment. Dr. Chen nodded and started to walk toward the camera crew, but something made her pause. Sometimes the most important moments happen when no one is watching, when there are no cameras rolling and no scripts to follow. Sometimes healing begins with the simplest gestures, the ones that come from the heart rather than from medical training or professional obligation. Dr. Chen changed direction and walked toward Tommy instead of the waiting camera crew. The reporter's voice calling her name faded into background noise as she focused on the small boy who seemed to need something more than medical attention. Tommy looked up in surprise as Dr. Chen approached his corner. He had seen her around the hospital before, but she had never come to talk to him directly. Most of the medical staff were kind but busy, always rushing from one patient to another. He straightened up slightly, wondering if he was in trouble for sitting in the wrong place. "Hi there," Dr. Chen said softly, sitting down in the empty chair beside him. "I'm Dr. Chen. I've seen you here before, but I don't think we've been properly introduced." Tommy nodded shyly, unsure of what to say. Adults usually wanted something when they talked to him: to take his temperature, ask about his symptoms, or tell him to follow some new rule. But Dr. Chen just sat beside him quietly, not demanding anything. "That's a great baseball cap," she continued, noticing how he immediately reached up to adjust it. "Are you a fan of the team?" For the first time in weeks, Tommy's face showed a hint of interest. "My dad got it for me," he said quietly. "He said maybe we could go to a game sometime." His voice trailed off, and Dr. Chen understood that sometime might never come. Behind them, the camera crew was setting up for their final shot. The reporter looked frustrated, checking her watch and glancing in their direction. Dr. Chen could hear the cameraman asking if they should wait or proceed with the planned interview. She ignored them completely, giving Tommy her full attention. "I bet you know a lot about baseball," Dr. Chen said. "I never learned much about sports when I was growing up. Too busy studying." She smiled, and Tommy found himself smiling back. Just a little. The waiting room continued its usual rhythm around them. New families arrived for appointments, while others left after receiving news that would change their lives. Children cried, parents worried, and medical staff moved efficiently between tasks. But in their small corner, time seemed to slow down. Tommy began talking about baseball, sharing facts he had memorized from watching games on the small television in his hospital room. Dr. Chen listened intently, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested. For a few minutes, Tommy forgot about the IV port in his arm and the nausea that had become his constant companion. The reporter finally decided they couldn't wait any longer. She began filming her closing segment without Dr. Chen, adapting her script to work around the doctor's absence. The cameraman occasionally glanced toward the corner where Dr. Chen sat with Tommy, but the reporter kept his focus on the main story. Dr. Chen noticed Tommy's energy flagging as he talked. The chemotherapy treatments left him exhausted, and even simple conversations could drain him. She could see he was trying to stay engaged, not wanting their talk to end, but his small body was tired. "You know what I think?" Dr. Chen said gently. "I think you're one of the bravest kids I've met. Coming here for treatments, dealing with all this medical stuff, that takes real courage." Tommy's eyes filled with tears he had been holding back for weeks. "I don't feel brave," he whispered. "I feel scared all the time. And lonely." The admission came out in a rush, as if he had been waiting for someone to ask about his feelings instead of his symptoms. Dr. Chen felt her own eyes moisten. In 5 years of treating children with serious illnesses, she had learned that medical expertise was only part of healing. Sometimes what patients needed most was simply to be seen and heard as whole human beings, not just cases to be managed. "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave," she told him. "Brave means doing what you have to do even when you're frightened, and you're doing that every single day." The camera crew was packing up their equipment now, their story complete. They had footage of modern medical equipment, interviews with staff members, and cheerful shots of children playing in bright, welcoming spaces. Their piece would air that evening, showing viewers a polished version of what healing looked like. Dr. Chen reached into her lab coat pocket and pulled out a small notebook and pen. "I want to show you something," she said, tearing out a fresh page. "This is what I call a courage list. Every time you do something that scares you, like coming for treatment or talking to new people, you write it down." She wrote, "Talk to Dr. Chen about baseball," at the top of the page, and handed it to Tommy. His thin fingers traced the words, and for the first time in months, he felt proud of something he had done. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Tommy asked, his voice so quiet she had to lean closer to hear him. "I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday," Dr. Chen replied. "And if you want, we can talk about baseball again, or anything else you want to talk about." Tommy nodded eagerly, carefully folding the paper and putting it in his pocket. The simple gesture of being listened to had given him something he hadn't felt in months, hope that tomorrow might be a little less lonely. The reporter was doing her final equipment check when she noticed Dr. Chen still sitting with the child in the corner. For a moment, she considered approaching them for a quick interview. The human interest angle could add depth to her story. But something about the intimate nature of their conversation made her hesitate. Dr. Chen helped Tommy organize his few belongings: the old magazine, a small toy car his mother had brought him, and now his courage list. Such simple items, but they represented connection and comfort in a place that could feel overwhelming and frightening. "Dr. Chen," Tommy said as she prepared to check on her other patients. "Thank you for sitting with me. Nobody ever just sits with me anymore." The words hit Dr. Chen harder than she expected. In the rush to provide medical care, it was easy to forget that healing involved more than procedures and medications. Sometimes, the most powerful medicine was human connection, offered freely without expectation or agenda. As she stood to leave, Dr. Chen made a decision that would change both of their lives. This wouldn't be just a one-time conversation. Tommy needed an advocate, someone who would see him as more than a patient number or a medical case. He needed someone who would notice when he was struggling and celebrate his small victories. The camera crew finished loading their van and drove away, taking with them their carefully constructed story about medical excellence and institutional success. Left behind was the real story: a lonely child and a doctor who chose compassion over convenience, connection over protocol. Tommy watched Dr. Chen return to her duties, but now the hospital felt different to him. Less scary, more hopeful. He took out his courage list and read the single line again, already thinking about what he might add tomorrow. Thursday arrived faster than Tommy had expected. He woke up that morning with something he hadn't felt in months: excitement. For the first time since his treatments began, he had something to look forward to besides going home. His mother, Maria, noticed the change immediately. Tommy ate more breakfast than usual and didn't complain when it was time to get ready for the hospital. He even asked if he could wear his good sneakers instead of the slip-on shoes that were easier to manage during medical procedures. "You seem different today, mijo," Maria said as they rode the bus to St. Mary's. She studied his face, searching for signs of fever or pain, but instead saw something she hadn't seen in weeks: anticipation. "Dr. Chen said she comes on Thursdays, too," Tommy explained, carefully holding his courage list in his jacket pocket. "She wants to hear about what brave things I did since Tuesday." Maria felt tears threaten to spill over. Her son had been carrying such a heavy burden, and she had been so focused on working enough hours to pay for his treatments that she sometimes missed the emotional toll it was taking on him. The idea that someone at the hospital cared about Tommy as a person, not just a patient, filled her with gratitude. At the hospital, Tommy walked through the familiar corridors with new purpose. He had practiced what he would tell Dr. Chen about his week. He had added 2 items to his courage list: 8 vegetables even though they tasted funny after medicine, and helped Mom fold laundry when I felt tired. The pediatric ward was busier than usual. A new group of student nurses was touring the facility, and several families were waiting for consultation appointments. Tommy found his usual corner seat and settled in to wait, but this time, the waiting felt different. Instead of dreading the hours ahead, he was counting the minutes until Dr. Chen might appear. Dr. Chen was running behind schedule. She had been called into an emergency consultation for a 6-year-old girl who had been admitted overnight with complications from her treatment. The morning had been filled with urgent medical decisions and family meetings that couldn't be postponed. But even as she dealt with the crisis, part of her mind was thinking about Tommy. She had found herself looking forward to their Thursday conversation almost as much as he had. There was something about his quiet resilience that reminded her why she had chosen to specialize in pediatric medicine. When she finally made it to the main waiting area, it was nearly noon. She spotted Tommy immediately, still in his corner, but sitting straighter than she remembered. He was showing his courage list to another child, a girl about his age who was wearing a colorful headscarf. "This is Emma," Tommy said proudly as Dr. Chen approached. "She just started coming here, and I told her about the courage list. She already has 3 things to write down." Emma looked up shyly at Dr. Chen. "Tommy says you're the doctor who really listens to kids, not just to their sickness." Dr. Chen felt her heart swell. Without realizing it, Tommy had become a mentor to another frightened child. His own experience with fear and loneliness had given him the ability to recognize and comfort others going through similar struggles. "That's exactly right," Dr. Chen said, sitting down with both children. "How are you both doing today?" Tommy eagerly shared his courage list additions, explaining how each item had seemed scary but turned out to be manageable. Emma listened intently, and Dr. Chen could see the girl's anxiety decreasing as Tommy spoke about his experiences with humor and honesty. "The medicine makes everything taste weird," Tommy told Emma. "But I figured out that if I eat something really cold afterward, like popsicles, it helps. And when I'm too tired to play regular games, I make up stories in my head about adventures." Dr. Chen watched Tommy transform from a lonely, frightened patient into a confident friend offering support to someone newer to the journey. The change was remarkable, and it had happened in just 2 days since their first real conversation. Emma's mother approached, looking relieved to see her daughter talking with another child. "Emma has been so worried about starting treatment," she confided to Dr. Chen quietly. "But talking to Tommy seems to have helped more than anything we've tried." The afternoon continued with an informal gathering in the corner of the waiting room. Other children drifted over, drawn by the unusual sight of kids actually talking and laughing in a place usually filled with worry and fear. Dr. Chen found herself facilitating what amounted to a peer support group, something that had developed organically around Tommy's simple courage list. A 10-year-old boy named Marcus shared how he had been embarrassed about losing his hair until he saw Tommy's confident way of wearing his baseball cap. "I thought everyone would stare at me," Marcus admitted. "But Tommy told me that people look at us because they think we're strong, not because they think we look weird." Dr. Chen realized she was witnessing something special. Medical textbooks talked about patient support systems and therapeutic community building, but this was happening naturally, facilitated by children who understood each other's experiences in ways that adults couldn't fully grasp. A nurse approached to take Tommy for his afternoon treatment. Usually, this interruption would break up any conversations and send children back to their private worlds of worry. But today was different. "Can we meet here again next week?" Emma asked. "I want to show everyone my courage list after my first treatment." "I'll be here Tuesday and Thursday," Tommy promised. "Dr. Chen, too." As Tommy walked toward the treatment area, Dr. Chen noticed his posture had changed completely from the hunched, defensive stance she had first observed. He walked with purpose now, his head held higher, his steps more confident. The transformation wasn't just in Tommy. Emma's mother whispered a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Chen as they prepared to leave. Marcus's father mentioned how his son had talked non-stop about the Brave Kids Club during the drive home. Word was already spreading among families about the informal support network that had formed in the corner of the waiting room. Dr. Chen realized that what had started as a simple gesture of compassion toward one lonely child had grown into something much larger. The Courage List concept was spreading, with parents asking for blank pages and children comparing their accomplishments. But the real magic wasn't in the lists themselves. It was in the way the children had found their voices, discovered their strength, and learned to support each other. Tommy had gone from being an isolated patient to becoming a natural leader who helped other children navigate their own fears. As she completed her rounds that afternoon, Dr. Chen reflected on how the most powerful healing sometimes happened outside of treatment rooms and away from medical equipment. Connection, understanding, and the simple act of being seen and valued as a complete person. These were medicines that couldn't be prescribed, but could transform a patient's entire experience. The news story about the hospital had aired the previous evening, featuring all the expected elements about medical advances and facility improvements. But the real story, the one about a lonely boy who found his courage and shared it with others, was unfolding quietly in a corner of the waiting room, one conversation at a time. Tommy's treatment that day went more smoothly than usual. When the nurse commented on his positive attitude, he explained about his courage list and the new friends he was making. Before long, the medical staff was hearing about the informal support group that had formed around Dr. Chen and Tommy's simple act of connection. 3 weeks had passed since that first conversation between Dr. Chen and Tommy, and the corner of the pediatric waiting room had become an unofficial gathering place. What started as one lonely child had grown into a small community of young patients who looked forward to their hospital visits for reasons beyond medical care. Tommy had become the unofficial leader of what the children now called the Courage Club. His original list had grown to 2 full pages, with entries ranging from "asked the nurse a question when I was scared" to "helped a new kid find the bathroom." Each accomplishment, no matter how small, was celebrated by the group. Dr. Chen watched this transformation with growing amazement. The medical staff had begun referring other struggling patients to the corner area, knowing they would find peer support that no amount of professional counseling could replicate. Children who had been withdrawn and fearful were now sharing stories, comparing experiences and finding strength in their shared journey. Emma had become Tommy's closest friend in the group. Her treatments were progressing well, and her confidence had grown tremendously since that first nervous conversation. She had started bringing art supplies to their gatherings, creating colorful drawings that the children would trade with each other like precious treasures. "Look what I made for you," Emma said to Tommy on a Tuesday morning, presenting him with a drawing of a baseball player wearing a cap just like his. "He's hitting a home run against cancer." Tommy carefully studied the drawing, his eyes bright with tears of joy rather than sadness. "This is the best present anyone ever gave me," he said, and Emma beamed with pride. The club had developed its own traditions and rituals. New members were welcomed with a special ceremony where everyone shared their favorite courage list item and offered one piece of advice for hospital survival. Older members took responsibility for mentoring newer arrivals, creating a cycle of support that extended far beyond what any single doctor could provide. Dr. Chen had initially worried that she might be overstepping professional boundaries by becoming so personally involved with the children. But when she discussed the situation with Dr. Peterson, the department head's response surprised her. "Sarah, in 30 years of practicing medicine, I've learned that healing happens in many different ways," Dr. Peterson told her. "What you've created with these children is remarkable. We're seeing improved treatment compliance, better emotional stability, and stronger family engagement across the board. Don't second-guess yourself." The informal nature of the group was part of its power. Unlike structured therapy sessions or organized activities, the Courage Club felt natural and child-led. Dr. Chen served more as a facilitator than a director, ensuring the children felt safe and supported while allowing them to guide their own interactions. Marcus, the boy who had been self-conscious about his hair loss, had become the group's comedian. He created funny voices for different medical procedures and turned scary experiences into adventures worthy of superheroes. His ability to find humor in difficult situations helped other children approach their treatments with less anxiety. "The IV machine is actually a robot that gives you superpowers," Marcus would tell nervous newcomers. "You just have to be brave enough to let it connect with you. See this port in my arm? That's my power source." The children giggled at his explanations, but underneath the humor was a real strategy for coping with invasive medical procedures. By reframing scary experiences as adventures or superhero training, Marcus helped his friends find courage they didn't know they possessed. Dr. Chen began documenting the changes she observed in the children's medical files. Tommy's treatment. Compliance had improved dramatically. He no longer fought the nurses during procedures and actually reminded his mother about appointment times. Emma's anxiety scores on standardized assessments had dropped significantly. Marcus was sleeping better and had fewer episodes of treatment-related nausea. But the changes weren't limited to the original group members. Word about the Courage Club had spread through the hospital's family network, and parents were specifically requesting appointment times that would allow their children to participate in the informal gatherings. Maria, Tommy's mother, had noticed the transformation in her son immediately. "He talks about his hospital friends now," she told Dr. Chen during a parent conference. "Before, coming here was just something terrible we had to endure. Now he looks forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays. He even asks to come early so he can spend more time with the other kids." The impact extended to the families as well. Parents who had been struggling with isolation and fear found support through connections made by their children. Maria had exchanged phone numbers with Emma's mother, and they now carpooled to appointments and shared resources about treatment side effects and school accommodations. Dr. Chen realized that the Courage Club had created something hospitals often struggled to provide: a sense of community and normalcy within the medical environment. The children were still patients dealing with serious illnesses, but they were also friends, mentors, and supporters of each other. One Thursday morning, a new challenge presented itself. A 5-year-old boy named Jamie was brought to the hospital, in crisis. His leukemia had relapsed, and he would need to start an intensive treatment protocol immediately. Jamie was terrified, clinging to his grandmother and refusing to cooperate with even basic medical procedures. Tommy overheard the nurses discussing the situation and approached Dr. Chen with a serious expression. "Can Jamie come sit with us?" he asked. "I remember being that scared when I first came here. Maybe we can help him feel better." Dr. Chen hesitated. Jamie was younger than the other club members and dealing with a more severe crisis. But looking at Tommy's earnest face and remembering how much the peer support had meant to him, she decided to trust the children's instincts. "Let me talk to Jamie's grandmother first," she said. "If she thinks it might help, we can introduce him to the group." Jamie's grandmother, Mrs. Rodriguez, was desperate for anything that might help her grandson. She had watched him become increasingly withdrawn and fearful over the past few days, and traditional attempts at comfort weren't working. "Are you sure other children would want to spend time with someone this sick?" she asked Dr. Chen quietly. "Jamie is very weak, and he might cry a lot." "I think you'll be surprised," Dr. Chen replied. "These kids understand better than most adults what Jamie is going through." When Tommy and Emma approached Jamie's bed that afternoon, they didn't bring medical explanations or adult reassurances. Instead, Tommy showed Jamie his courage list and explained how each item had seemed impossible until he actually did it. "Being scared is okay," Tommy told the younger boy. "I was scared every single day when I first came here, but then I met Dr. Chen and Emma and Marcus, and now I have friends who understand why I'm scared sometimes." Emma offered Jamie one of her drawings, a picture of a brave little boy surrounded by colorful butterflies. "These are courage butterflies," she explained. "They help you feel better when you're scared." For the first time since his admission, Jamie stopped crying and listened to what the older children were telling him. He didn't speak, but he accepted Emma's drawing and allowed Tommy to sit on the edge of his bed. Dr. Chen watched from across the room, marveling at the natural therapeutic instincts these children had developed. They offered exactly what Jamie needed. Not false promises that everything would be easy, but honest acknowledgement of fear, combined with proof that scared children could still be brave. The Courage Club's influence continued to grow throughout the hospital. Nurses began scheduling their breaks around the informal gathering times so they could observe the remarkable peer support system that had developed. Social workers started referring struggling families to the group, recognizing that sometimes the best therapy came from children who truly understood each other's experiences. Jamie had slowly warmed up to his new friends over the course of 2 weeks. His grandmother was amazed at the change in his demeanor. While he still faced difficult treatments and uncertain outcomes, he no longer seemed to be fighting the battle entirely alone. "Tommy comes to visit me even when it's not his appointment day," Jamie told his grandmother one evening. "And Emma taught me how to draw courage butterflies. Want to see?" Mrs. Rodriguez studied the colorful drawing her grandson proudly displayed. The butterflies were lopsided and the colors went outside the lines, but the picture radiated the kind of hope she hadn't seen in Jamie's eyes since his diagnosis. Dr. Chen had been documenting the group's evolution, and the results were remarkable, enough to warrant sharing with the hospital's administration. Children who participated in the Courage Club showed measurably better treatment compliance, reduced anxiety scores, and improved overall emotional well-being compared to patients who didn't have access to peer support. But the most significant change was one that couldn't be measured in medical terms. The transformation from victims to survivors, from isolated patients to members of a caring community. Tommy's own medical progress had been steady. His latest scans showed good response to treatment, and his oncologist was optimistic about his prognosis. But even more encouraging was his emotional growth. The frightened, lonely boy who had sat silently in the corner months earlier had become a confident young leader who actively looked for ways to help others. "I want to keep coming here even after my treatments are done," Tommy told his mother one day. "Maybe I can help other kids who are just starting, like how the older kids helped me." Maria felt her heart swell with pride. Her son had not only survived cancer treatment, but had discovered strength and purpose through helping others. The experience had taught him empathy and resilience that would serve him well throughout his life. The Courage Club had also begun attracting attention from outside the hospital. A local newspaper reporter heard about the peer support group and requested permission to write a feature story. Dr. Chen was initially hesitant, remembering how the news crew's presence had highlighted Tommy's isolation months earlier. "I don't Want the children to feel like they're performing or being exploited, she told Dr. Peterson during their weekly meeting. This group works because it's authentic and child-directed. Adding media attention might change that dynamic. Dr. Peterson agreed to be cautious, but suggested they consider the potential benefits. If handled sensitively, sharing this story could help other hospitals develop similar programs. It might also help reduce the stigma that children with serious illnesses often face. After discussing the idea with Tommy, Emma, Marcus, and several other core group members, Dr. Chen was surprised by their enthusiasm for sharing their story. Other kids in different hospitals might be lonely like I was, Tommy reasoned. If they hear about the Courage Club, maybe their doctors will start one too. Emma nodded eagerly. And maybe people will understand that just because we're sick doesn't mean we can't be happy sometimes. We're still regular kids who like to have friends and do fun things. The newspaper interview took place on a Thursday afternoon in the familiar corner of the waiting room. The reporter, Janet Mills, was a soft-spoken woman who specialized in human interest stories. She had done extensive research beforehand and understood the sensitivity required when interviewing children dealing with serious illnesses. Unlike the television crew that had visited months earlier, Janet focused on the children's own words and experiences rather than creating a predetermined narrative about medical success or institutional achievements. What makes the Courage Club special? She asked the group. We understand each other, Emma explained. When Tommy tells me he's scared about a new treatment, I know exactly what that feels like. Other kids at school try to be nice, but they don't really get it, Marcus added. And we celebrate things that might seem silly to healthy people. Like when Jamie ate his whole lunch yesterday, even though the medicine made everything taste funny. That was huge for him. Tommy, now comfortable, speaking to adults, articulated something that impressed even Dr. Chen. Having cancer isn't fun, but it taught me that I'm braver than I thought I was. And it taught me that helping other people feel less scared makes me feel better too. The resulting newspaper article, titled "Young Patients Find Strength in Friendship," focused on the children's own voices and experiences rather than medical statistics or institutional praise. The story resonated with readers throughout the region, generating dozens of letters and emails from families dealing with similar challenges. Several other hospitals reached out to Dr. Chen asking for guidance on how to replicate the peer support model. She was invited to speak at a pediatric nursing conference about the therapeutic value of unstructured patient interaction and the role medical professionals could play in facilitating natural community building. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from other children. Letters arrived from young patients at hospitals hundreds of miles away, asking for advice on starting their own courage clubs or simply sharing their own stories of fear, hope, and resilience. Tommy insisted on responding personally to every letter. With his mother's help, he wrote encouraging notes to children facing their own medical challenges, often including copies of his courage list as inspiration. One letter particularly moved the entire group. It came from a 9-year-old girl named Sophia in another state who had been following their story. Dear Courage Club, Sophia wrote in careful handwriting, I don't have other sick kids at my hospital, but I made my own courage list after reading. About yours. Yesterday I added, told my doctor about my bad dreams, and today I'm going to add, wrote a letter to kids who understand. Thank you for showing me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. Dr. Chen read Sophia's letter aloud to the group, and several children had tears in their eyes by the time she finished. We should write back to her right away, Emma said, and maybe we can help her find other kids at her hospital who might want to start a group. The Courage Club had evolved from a simple gesture of compassion into a movement that was touching lives far beyond the walls of St. Mary's Hospital. But at its heart, it remained exactly what it had always been. Children supporting children, sharing strength in the face of uncertainty, and proving that healing involves much more than medical treatment. Dr. Chen realized that her decision To sit down beside a lonely boy in a hospital waiting room had created ripples that continued to spread in ways she never could have imagined. 6 months later, the Courage Club had become an integral part of St. Mary's Children's Hospital. What had started as an informal gathering in a corner waiting room now had official recognition and dedicated space. The hospital administration had converted a small conference room into the Courage Corner, complete with comfortable seating, art supplies, and a bulletin board where children could post their accomplishments. Tommy's treatments had concluded successfully. His latest scans showed no evidence of disease, and his oncologist had declared him in remission. But true to his word, he continued visiting the hospital twice a week as a volunteer peer mentor, working alongside Dr. Chen to welcome new children to the Courage Club. At 10 years old now, Tommy had grown taller and stronger. His hair had grown, back thick and dark, though he still wore his father's baseball cap most days, not to hide anything, but as a reminder of his journey and a symbol of the courage he had discovered within himself. The Courage Club had developed its own traditions and rituals over the months. New members received a special welcome ceremony where they were presented with their first Courage Journal, an upgrade from Tommy's original single sheet of paper. The journals were donated by community members who had heard about the program. Through the newspaper article and word of mouth, Emma, now cancer-free for 4 months, had become the club's official artist. She created personalized covers for each new Courage Journal, incorporating symbols that were meaningful to each child. For a 6-year-old boy who loved dinosaurs, she drew a brave triceratops wearing a hospital gown. For a teenage girl struggling with body image after surgery, she created an elegant design featuring butterflies emerging from cocoons. Marcus had discovered a talent for storytelling and had begun creating audio recordings of adventure stories featuring brave children who faced challenges similar to those experienced by club members. His stories were played in treatment rooms throughout the hospital, helping children feel less alone during procedures. Jamie, now 7 and also in remission, had become Tommy's apprentice in welcoming the youngest new members. His gentle manner and obvious understanding of fear made him particularly effective at comforting children who were just beginning their medical journeys. Dr. Chen had been promoted to head of the hospital's new patient experience program, a role created specifically to expand the success of the Courage Club model throughout the entire medical center. She worked with different departments to identify opportunities for peer support and community building among patients of all ages. The program had attracted national attention, with medical professionals from across the country visiting St. Mary's to observe the Courage Club in action. Dr. Chen had co-authored several research papers documenting the measurable benefits of peer support programs, helping to establish evidence-based protocols that other hospitals could implement. But she never forgot that the most important measure of the program's success wasn't found in research data or professional recognition. It was visible in the faces of children who had discovered they were stronger than they knew and that they didn't have to face their challenges alone. On a warm Tuesday afternoon in late spring, the Courage Club was celebrating a special milestone. It had been exactly 1 year since Dr. Chen had first sat down beside Tommy in the hospital waiting room. The moment had been captured on the security cameras that day, though no one had paid attention to the footage until much later. Mrs. Rodriguez, Jamie's grandmother, had suggested creating a celebration to mark the anniversary. "That conversation changed everything for so many children," she had told Dr. Chen. "It deserves to be remembered." The celebration brought together current club members, graduates who were now healthy, families, and hospital staff who had supported the program's growth. Tommy had prepared a speech for the occasion, though he was nervous about speaking in front of such a large group. "A year ago, I was the loneliest kid in this hospital," he began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "I thought being sick meant I had to be scared and sad all the time. I thought nobody understood what I was going through." He paused, looking around the room at the faces of children and families whose lives had been touched by the Courage Club's mission. Dr. Chen taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs to be done even when you are scared. But the Courage Club taught me something even more important. It taught me that helping other people be brave makes you braver too. Emma stood up from the audience and walked to the front of the room. Tommy helped me write my first Courage List entry, she said, smiling at her friend. It said, talk to other kids about being scared. That was the day I stopped feeling like cancer made me different from everyone else in a bad way. Now I know it makes me different in a good way. It made me stronger and kinder. One by one, other children and family members shared their stories about how the Courage Club had changed their hospital experience. Parents talked about watching their children transform from frightened patients to confident advocates for themselves and others. Dr. Peterson, the department head who had supported Dr. Chen's unconventional approach from the beginning, presented the program with an official commendation from the hospital board. But he also shared something more personal. When I first heard about Dr. Chen sitting in the waiting room talking to patients instead of filming interviews with news crews, I thought it was simply good bedside manner, he admitted. I had no idea we were witnessing the beginning of something that would revolutionize how we think about healing and patient care. The celebration included the unveiling of a permanent display in the hospital's main lobby featuring photos and quotes from Courage Club members. The centerpiece was Tommy's original Courage List, now framed and accompanied by a plaque that read, "Healing begins when we see each patient not as a medical case, but as a whole person deserving of compassion, dignity, and connection." As the formal program concluded, the children naturally gravitated toward their familiar corner space, now officially designated as the Courage Corner. New friendships continued to form as they had from the beginning, organically, authentically, and with the kind of understanding that could only come from shared experience. Dr. Chen watched the interactions with the same wonder she had felt a year earlier. The Courage Club had grown and evolved, but its essence remained unchanged. Children were still finding strength in each other, celebrating small victories, and proving that resilience could be contagious. Tommy approached her as the evening wound down, carrying a wrapped package. "This is for you," he said shyly. "It's from all of us." Inside the package was a photo album chronicling the past year of the Courage Club. Pictures showed children at different stages of treatment and recovery, always surrounded by friends who understood their journey. The final page contained a group photo of all the current and former members, with a message written in colorful markers. "Thank you, Dr. Chen, for sitting down beside one scared kid and changing everything. You taught us that the best medicine sometimes doesn't come from a prescription. It comes from caring about each other." As Dr. Chen looked at the faces in the photograph, some thin and pale from treatment, others glowing with health, all radiating the quiet confidence that came from knowing they were not alone, she reflected on how a single moment of choosing compassion over convenience had created something far more powerful than she had ever imagined. The Courage Club would continue to grow and evolve, touching the lives of countless children and families in the years to come. But it would always be rooted in that first gentle gesture. A doctor who chose to sit beside a lonely child and listen, really listen, to what he needed most. In a world where medical care often focused on treating diseases rather than healing people, the Courage Club stood as proof that sometimes the most profound medicine came not from advanced technology or cutting-edge procedures, but from the simple recognition that every patient was a complete human being, deserving of connection, understanding, and hope. The cameras had never captured that truth, but it lived on in every child who discovered their own courage and chose to share it with others who needed it most.